BS-Free Witchcraft is a production of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Nerd and Tie produces podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime, and you can find more at nerdandtie.com or join our Discord by going to nerdandtie.com/Discord. You're witching wrong! Or you're not. I don't know. Anyways, welcome to BS-Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement. Minus a lot of the usual, bullshit. I'm your host, Trey Dorn, and it is August of 2023, and we are going to talk about two things that irritate me a lot in this world. Those two things are, one, people who think the only way to be a witch is their way to be a witch. Like, you have to be, only their version of witchcraft is valid. The other kind the other thing that irritates me are the people who respond to any criticism of their actions with, "But I thought there wasn't only one way to be a witch." We're going to talk about why both of these bother me. We're going to talk about why it's important. And we're going to talk about nuance, my friends. Nuance. But before we get to that, I just want to mention one thing, and that is September 1st through 3rd in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, there's a little convention called No Brand Con, which you can find me at. You can find me at No Brand Con 2023 in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, September 1st through 3rd at the Holiday Inn Convention Center. And on Sunday, the 3rd, September 3rd, we're actually going to be doing a live version of the Nerd and Tie podcast, you know, that geek news podcast and convention news podcast that I do. And we're celebrating 10 years of that podcast being around at our live panel. So if you happen to be in Wisconsin and you like to go to an anime convention and maybe meet me, that is a thing that you can do. Anyways, back to witchcraft. I want to talk about, again, what do we mean when we say there's more than one way to witch? Well, witchcraft the modern witchcraft movement is a big umbrella. It's a big tent. And it includes a lot of different traditions which are frankly contradictory. It's anywhere from Wicca to attempted recreations of various forms of folk magic. The modern witchcraft movement, it's a bunch of different stuff. And it changes. What stuff is in there changes all the time. There's always new stuff getting added. Stuff that was maybe very niche 20 years ago is now the thing that people think that you have to do. And throughout the decades of the modern witchcraft movement, because let's be clear, what most people are doing in the modern witchcraft movement is based off of stuff that didn't really get its start until the 20th century. So let's not kid ourselves. A lot of it's contradictory, right? So, like, you take a look at and I talk about this in the Candles episode a long time ago, but, like, you look at, like, color correspondences and things like that. Often the source is just some guy said so, someone's unverified personal gnosis, and then they wrote it down, and then, like, 5 people copied that, and nobody sourced anything. Like, this stuff goes back. Try to take a look at any list of correspondences for, like, crystals and stones, right? Which, by the way, not really traditional. That's again, go back to crystal episode. The number of contradictory lists of correspondences, the number of sheer, absolute, like, and like 90% of every rock is like protection, and I'll tell you, any rock is a protective stone if you can hit someone over the head with it. That works real good. But it's all of this stuff. And so when we talk about, like, there's more than one way to witch, we mean that, like, a lot of people really in the end up operating off of either their own personal unverified personal gnosis, or continuing something that really did also start as someone else's unverified personal gnosis. And, like, I'm not saying there's something wrong with believing that stuff. I'm not saying there's something wrong with following down those paths, but you also have to understand that no one has to agree with you that that's how that works. And you don't necessarily have a better idea about what works than anybody else does, right? Like, even I'm certain that the way that I cast spells and the way I do things is the right way. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty certain I'm the one doing it the right way. However, there is no greater authority in that conversation than me to verify that. So with that, I can't go around telling people that no, you're doing it wrong. You should do it my way. My way is better. Do I have proof of that? Oh, absolutely none. I have no proof that my way works better than your way. But because I came up with my way, mine must be right. Like, that's bullshit, right? It's a seriously arrogant thing to do, to claim that you know more than other people, to claim that you are like, we see this all the time with Wiccans too, right? And I say this as a Wiccan, it's I say this as a Wiccan. This has been a perpetual problem where they'll jump into witchcraft spaces, find someone who doesn't practice Wicca, and start trying to enforce things on them. Monique Wilson's threefold law is the most common thing you see, like this dictation that, oh no, it comes back 3 times, which, by the way, again, not all Wiccans actually believe, because again, that's a later add-on by Monique Wilson that Raymond Buckland later popularized. That was not in the original. There's no like divine prophecy or enlightenment with Wicca's founding. It was just some people, man. They, like, I guess that you could like study your stuff, but it's like contradictory to the moral philosophy of the actual faith itself. So, like, to put in this sort of universal law, magic is just magic. Magic doesn't give a shit about you. Magic doesn't give a shit about me. A hammer it's a tool. It's a tool. You can use a hammer to build a house or break someone's kneecaps. You got choices. But that's my personal philosophy. If you want to moralize it, go right ahead. Keep it to your fucking self. Like, that's the thing. So when we talk about, like, there's no one right way to be a witch, what we're talking about is that contradictory philosophies are both called witchcraft. And yes, they are contradictory philosophies, and it would be very difficult to hold those two ideas in your head. However, that does not make, just because they conflict, doesn't give either one any more authority on what can be considered witchcraft, which is, again, a large umbrella for a large, varied number of traditions that do not agree with each other. We come together, we're grouped together as a cultural movement, not a religious one. I mean, and again, there is religious witchcraft, and some people will argue that the belief in any kind of mysticism would be considered religion under certain academic definitions of religion, and it comes into the whole, like, concept of secular witchcraft. It's really complicated to define that, but then we're getting into the definition of words. That's just the definition of what we consider religious and what we don't consider religious are that's a different conversation for another day. And, yeah. Anyways, the point is that these are contradictory philosophies can both be included in the modern witchcraft movement, because this is not a movement that is defined by a shared belief beyond the belief that there is some sort of magic, that witchcraft is a thing. And actually, there are people who do witchcraft who do not believe that magic is real either, and who think they are define what they do as magic as psychological tricks on themselves. And that's also okay. We all get, right? It's all within, this is not a movement defined by a shared system of belief. It is a shared culture based around it. And that's why the modern witchcraft movement is separate from the neo-pagan community, even though they used to be considered the same thing. And again, there is still a large overlap. The Venn diagram just pretty much has 2 little crescents on the outside. So when we talk about that, what we're not saying is that that you can't define a form of witchcraft, right? Like, when we say there's no one way to be a witch, we're not talking about everything. Like, obviously, like, to be a Wiccan witch, there are some definitions. There are certain orthopraxic definitions. Like, for example, a Wiccan needs to be either initiated by another Wiccan or perform a self-dedication ceremony. That moment of initiation, be it by another Wiccan or by themselves, that is a ritual and a choice that a Wiccan has to do, and you do not become a Wiccan until you do it. Right? And so that is a step that there is certain criterion definitions for that specific form of witchcraft. Right? So when we talk about there's no one way to be a witch, that is true. However, there are requirements for types of witchcraft. So there are wrong ways to do something to fit the definition of a particular kind of witchcraft. I use Wicca as the example because that's the one I know the best. Like, obviously there are other definitions and other kinds, but I don't want to speak for those groups and say what their rules are, because I would get it wrong probably. I would get it like 90% right and then like the 10% wrong, and then everybody would remember the 10% wrong that I got, and that's not even the point. So that's why I'm using Wicca as the example. But like, there are minimum orthopraxic and orthodoxic requirements to be a Wiccan, in my opinion. Some people, again, claim pure orthopraxy. I disagree, and I would love to have that theological debate with you, but that's not important right now. What's important is that we do agree that there are rules to what makes that thing. So, when we say there's no one way to be a witch, we are not using that as a catch-all. We are not describing everything that has ever, like, that you can do whatever the fuck you want. That's not what we're saying. We are saying you can do whatever the fuck you want and still be considered a witch, just not every kind of witch. Hopefully, that made sense. The other thing that bothers me, though, is, so what happens is that people hear this phrase, right? They hear there's no one way to be a witch, and they think that means there's no rules for anything. Because as I just said, there are fucking rules. There are rules. They think that means that, oh, you know, it's, and you hear things like, oh, now you're gatekeeping me. Oh, you're trying to tell me I can't do something. I thought there was no one way to be a witch. You know, when we talk about closed traditions, or we talk about things from closed cultures, and I don't know how to tell you this, but when people are telling you not to take from closed cultures, we are asking you not to be a bad person. And I want to let you know something. You can be a bad person and a witch at the same time. So it's like, say we get like Bobby the appropriator. Bobby decides he wants to start doing Tradition X. Tradition X is from an ethno-religion that is closed to outsiders. And Bobby comes from an ethnicity that has historically oppressed the people of that tradition. Bobby will start doing that and start culturally appropriating it. Bobby, when criticized, will say, well, who are you to tell me what I can spiritually do? They're telling you what you can do culturally, as a human being, as a person in a society. And then they'll be like, but I thought there wasn't only one right way to be a witch. Bitch, no one is telling you you're not a witch. No one is telling you you're not a witch. They're telling you you're an asshole. So I want you to get used to not moralizing the term witch. Some of the worst people you've ever met could be witches. Being a witch doesn't make you a good person or a bad person. You're a person still. And if you're an asshole, it makes you an asshole when you do something that's assholey. Yeah, you're right. It is still witchcraft. You're still a dick. So, like, I could pull up some examples on TikTok, like showing these people doing this stuff. I could pull up Tumblr posts, but I'm not gonna, because frankly, I don't want to give these people the publicity. Like, there was a video floating around TikTok like a month and a half ago about like some suburban white kid going like, I don't think cultural appropriation's real, and it's not in witchcraft, and why should I limit myself to, I'm like, because you're being an asshole. Like, I can't teach you empathy. What's the Onion headline? Something like, I don't know how to explain to you that you should care about other people. Like, it's a selfish bullshit attitude to live with. But yeah, you're right. You are still a witch. You're just also an asshole. And maybe, just maybe, consider not being an asshole? Like, don't be an asshole. Don't be an asshole. It's really not hard. It's really not, it's not difficult at all to not be a dick. It's not difficult to not be mean to people. So it's like, so when we talk about it, when we talk about that sort of thing, people always try to deflect. Like, that's what drives me nuts. It's the deflection. It's the, I couldn't possibly be the bad guy. I thought there wasn't one. So when we tell you there's no one way to be a witch, what we mean is that to be considered a witch, all you really have to do is practice some sort of thing that you define as magic and call yourself a witch. That's the umbrella. That's everybody. The self-selected title of witch is like 99% of it, and then do some magic. Now, that doesn't mean you're every kind of witch. That doesn't mean that specific traditions don't have rules. It means that the umbrella term of witch doesn't. And you are still a witch even when you do something shitty to people. Like, even when you do something awful, you're still a witch. There's this thing that I hate, that I see. And it's from people who largely agree with me on things. They try to, like, moralize being a witch, like bad people can't be witches. Like, someone said, I saw some post, it was a long time ago, saying, oh, TERFs aren't witches anymore. I'm like, no, they can be witches. They're also assholes and TERFs, but they can still be considered witches, and we have to own that as a community, right? Like, the modern witchcraft movement is a social movement, and we have to deal with the bad actors, but we don't get to redefine the term to exclude them. We just have to keep them with... Assholes get driven out of communal spaces. That's what we do. People either need to correct their behavior or get out. But those are the spaces. And we don't get to pretend that bad people aren't in our social group. Not in social group, but we don't get to pretend the bad people are in our social movement because they're assholes. We have to understand that that is a part of the culture that we are in. And we have to then work to improve the culture, not just pretend it's not happening. We don't get to put our fingers in our ears and go la 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 la. It's happening. So that is really, if you take anything away from anything I ever say, it is that we got to clean our own house, and we don't get to pretend they're not in the house because it happens to disagree with our sensibilities. We're stuck with them until we deal with them. Same thing with the Nazis. It's the same thing with everything else. So, that's the situation. So again, it's true that there is no one way to witch. You really can't witch wrong as a witch, but you can be an asshole, and you don't get to use that as a defense when you get called out for doing something that makes you an asshole. Pretty simple. I know that some of these unsourced things where I just go on a communal rant, or some people love these episodes, some people hate these episodes, but that's what I got for you this month. I'm helping run a convention, again, September 1st through 3rd in Stevens Point, Wisconsin at the Holiday Inn Convention Center. You will find my ass slowly dying for 3 days and then co-hosting a podcast on Sunday. So you should check it out. More information about No Brand Con is available at nobrandcon.org. nobrandcon.org, and you can find more stuff there. But anyways, about this show that you're listening to right now, that you listen to on purpose, BS for Witchcraft is brought to you by my lovely Patreon patrons who really help keep the lights on for this whole podcast network. Literally, it's and you can support this show by going to my Patreon at patreon.com/TRAEGORN. And I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons at the $10 level of Stephanie Graves, Lindsay Dosey, Bruce Norville, Courtney, Amber Schmidt, Claire Dennis, and Kayla Brakowski. If you want to contribute even just $1 a month, you get episodes like this a whole week early. And again, you can find that at patreon.com/TRAEGORN. If you want to support the show in other ways, just feel free to share the crap out of it. You can find me on Tumblr primarily at traegorn.tumblr.com. I am on Facebook. This page is on the show is on Facebook at the Facebook page, facebook.com/bsfreewitchcraft. Do not try to find my personal page. I will block and ignore you. That is where I talk to my mom. I keep having to tell people this. But if you want to follow us on other social media, technically I still have Twitter and X, whatever the heck you want to call it. It's TRAEGORN. I don't use it that... fuck Musk. I technically am on Threads at TRAEGORN. I really haven't been using it that much because I didn't like the fact that I couldn't just see a feed of the accounts I was following. I want a reverse chronological feed of all the accounts I follow. I don't necessarily need to sit on that all day, but that's what I want available to me. You can find me on TikTok, which I am sporadic at, but do post content there from time to time at TRAEGORN. And I am also technically on Mastodon, which again, I just haven't found a lot of people I want to follow on Mastodon, but TRAEGORN at mastodon.social is my Mastodon. I'm still sorting out the current social media landscape. Tumblr's the only one that I'm really consistently on all the time. So that's the safest way to find stuff from the show and share it with your friends. But all that other stuff is there. Remember that this podcast, like everything on this network, has a Discord, which you can find an invite to that Discord at nerdandtie.com/Discord. We're a part of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network, where you can find a whole bunch of other great shows at nerdandtie.com, including Famicom Dojo, a retro gaming podcast hosted by Sean Orange and Vink, and it's good. You can find the Nerd and Tie Podcast, the geek news and convention news podcast that I host monthly, with my friends Celeste and Gen, and we're celebrating 10 years right now. So that's wild. And you can find all those shows and a whole lot more, including Hex Positive by Brina Guerin at nerdandtie.com. Check out the shows. They're super fun and great. With that, Magicians, I think it's time for me to sign off and run away. It's always a trip to talk to y'all. And remember, for next time, dirt in our fingernails, brick in our hands. Talk to you next month, Talk to you next month, Magicians. I'm going to leave this in. I'm going to leave this in. Like the Man with One Eye song will be playing in the background, and we just get to live with me rambling on at the end. And now we all live this way. You're welcome.